Hello and welcome to Report Desk Africa. This is the show where we give you your weekly dose of insight on what's happening across the African continent. Call it giving you continental development. And we don't just stop at that. We also go straight into the analysis of these issues. We look at past events, present happenings, and of course, future expectations. And today we will be doing just that. My name is Blessings Mosugu, your co-host for the show today, and I'm not alone.
And my name is Adeshawa Odushoga. The program is Report Desk Africa, where we dive into different hot-button issues, from political upheavals and conflicts to economic development and technological progress, as we provide context so you can make sense of these complex stories in a way that goes beyond just the headlines.
Well, last week we told you that the conviction of firebrand political opponent Usman Sonko is in a moral corruption scandal final, leaving him ineligible for the 2024 presidential election. We also detail you about the Africa Climate Summit, which came to a close yesterday. And we mentioned that the summit is set to shift focus from floods, famine to finance. And that's why that is going to be one of our major focus for today's conversation.
And finally, we told you that there have been calls for peace by the new president of Amhara's regional state as Ethiopia count cost of regional flare-ups.
Well, don't go anywhere. It's Report Desk Africa. We will be right back with the major topics for discourse today. Stay tuned.
Never in the democratic history of Nigeria has a sitting president been deposed by the law for electoral irregularities, and that may have led to a mixed expectations from the 2023 Presidential Elections Tribunal. The 2023 Presidential Election Tribunal sitting in Abuja delivered its verdict after listening to the petitions filed by the APM, Labour Party, and the PDP. The judgment has sparked mixed reactions from Nigerians as the tribunal struck out the petitions against the APC and INEC with the Vice President Kashim Shettima and chieftains of all the parties involved in attendance. Presidential candidates of the three most involved parties, including the sitting president, were not in attendance as the judgment was delivered. Points have been raised about the credibility of the tribunal's decision and the sanctity of the Nigerian judiciary. There is more in this report. No legal challenge to a presidential election has ever succeeded since 1999, one that we have seen played out again in the 2023 presidential election. The decision of the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal have generated diverse reactions, one that has returned victory to the sitting president, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, against the candidacy of Peter Obi and Atiku Abubakar.
Yesterday's judgment, final verdict or reading, has exhumed another ghost of international shame in regard of this illegitimate government.
The same INEC, if to the election said election results will be transmitted electronically. I held on to that word. Now INEC went to the court and then different things came up. Which is, see, I think it will get to a time in this part of the world, INEC will appeal to Nigerians to come out and vote because so many Nigerians have lost hope.
The judgment did not only favor the APC, the judgment favor the other party. Where we have like two National Assembly that was being taken away from the APC and give it to the PDP candidates in Kogi State, to Dragan, if I may correct. They gave it to the national. They took it away from the APC and they gave it to PDP. So and I think that one favor PDP too.
No, in Nigerian legal jurisprudence, it is based on evidence. Unfortunately, personally, I'm not satisfied. I was not satisfied with the electoral process. But you cannot entirely fault the electoral tribunal if what they did is based on law and technicality. I think the people to be blamed majorly is the umpire, INEC.
Activist and founder of Citizens Hub, Aisha Yusufu, while speaking on News Central's flagship program, expressed her displeasure over the verdict of the tribunal, adding that the judgment will be appealed at the Supreme Court.
I don't have any business trusting the Nigerian judiciary. I don't trust the Nigerian judiciary. The only thing is to overwhelm them with evidence. That's still my take. And yes, our Labour Party should go to the Supreme Court. If you're saying to INEC, you can set your guidelines, but you don't need to follow it. It's setting a precedent that is going to take Nigerian election back decades, where violence is going to come back again, just like what we had when the card reader was not admissible in court.
Nigerians have decided that the candidates have contested, but the Presidential Elections Petition Tribunal have read out their verdicts. One of the key takeaways from this is that this may start to birth more voter apathy in subsequent elections, with many expressing distrust for the judicial process in the country. From Lagos, Adeshawa Odushoga reporting for News Central.
Well, that was the report excellently delivered by my co-host Adeshawa Odushoga on the verdict that was delivered. Now, it took so long, and understandably so, for these verdicts to be delivered. I mean, old men were kept sitting for hours. And I mean, like I said, it's understandable because all the facts needed to be laid out and these judgments had to be based on fact. Now, it has been reiterated time without number that the judgment was based on fact, but notwithstanding, so many people have challenged it, saying that the facts were, in fact, in the words of the PDP spokesperson, Umar Ilya, says the fact was thrown overboard, saying that we keep saying that we're doing this based on constitution, but if we're looking at precedents and looking at what's happening now, we do not put into consideration facts. Now, that is going to be the basis for our conversation today. Joining us to discuss this is a broadcast journalist and analyst, Precious Enyi, a journalist and communication specialist. Thank you so much, Precious, for joining us on Report Desk Africa.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Okay, we also have communication strategist Charles Ideho joining us as well. Thank you, Charles, for joining us. He will be joining us subsequently. While we wait for him, we have Precious with us. Now, of course, we know that these petitions, one after the other, was thrown out as of yesterday at the verdict delivery. Now, would you say that the judicial system is to be trusted, seeing how some people are saying that we are not basing the judgment on fact, but the judiciary maintain that they're basing it on fact? Now, the jurisprudence of the country is now to be questioned. Which is legit? Are we following constitution, or are we just doing it based on sentiments?
All right. So first, I'd like to say that I think Nigerians only wanted closure or expected closure from the tribunal yesterday. You'd also recall that there hasn't been an election in the history of Nigeria, and a dispute after an election in the history of Nigeria with the kind of, in-depth interest that this particular election had aroused across board in Nigeria, especially within the youth. And it's quite interesting because this happens to be the very first election in Nigeria where we had a lot of voter awareness. Oftentimes you've seen situations where voters were usually ignorant. And I don't like to say ignorant, but nonchalant, because they felt they didn't have confidence or trust in the system. But because of the reassurance and assurance again that the umpire, INEC, had given to Nigerians, so that kind of aroused interest in a lot of Nigerians. And it's such a pity that the court could say that what INEC did were assurances, and that assurances were mere promises. And that's just leaves a little to be desired, because if you look at the kind of judgments that have been emanating from our judiciary in recent times, you want to look at the corpus of the Imo State, APC Imo State case, where the fourth position becomes the first, irrespective of how that judgment came. People saying that, okay, did you see the details of that judgment, where they assumed, or the court assumed, that all results from a particular session where votes didn't take place should be counted to, or should be ceded to him. And I'm wondering, what is actually the evidence that every person from that region would have voted him? That's what I want to ask. We also have the Lawan and Machina case anyway, and everyone does know till today that Ahmed Lawan, the former Senate president, did not contest for senatorial primaries, because we saw him contest for presidential primaries. But it's very magical how he made it to the Senate. Even his colleague, Rochas Okorocha, during valedictory session, had to ask that question. I'm sure you have to tell us about the magic that he performed. So these are the kind of things that brings forth that lack of confidence in Nigerians about the judiciary. So if the judiciary had, given the judgment in the ways that it did give out, are we saying, for instance, in the issue of the 25% in Abuja, Abuja cannot, have an exclusive position? So who is the governor of Abuja? And then who probably is the deputy governor of Abuja? How many senatorial seats do we have in Abuja, unlike that of other states, if Abuja does not share an exclusive status? And you would also like to recall that I think in the history of Nigeria, I can't recall, at least in the history of our democracy, any president of Nigeria that has at least not gone up to 25% in Abuja. Why is this case different? And I mean, if I did accuse you, for instance, that you do not, that your name is a fake name, or the place where you said your place of birth is wrong, and I did accuse you, and you presented a paper to, and I said probably to INEC, for instance, that the paper you presented to prove your date of birth is wrong. And I know that the onus lies on me to prove the right papers. But how about if INEC frustrates that effort? I mean, we're all in Nigeria. We're all in Nigeria when we saw the difficulty that almost all the political parties who were contesting this election faced a lot of difficulties in accessing materials from INEC. The case of Rivers State is even very worse, where we had, shrine present in the INEC office in Rivers State, just to ensure that they do not have access, or the opposition parties do not have access to electoral materials. And it's unfortunate that the court did not address that case, and did not in any way also perhaps reprimand, I don't like to say, because they're also respondents to the case, reprimand the umpire, for their position or the role that they have played. It's also very disheartening that until today, we still do not know the exact nature of glitch that INEC experienced that day with its IRF portal. Isn't it interesting? And till now, even though the judges are yet to ascertain from INEC the exact nature of glitch that they experienced, and they feel it's the judges in their revert position also did feel that it's okay to pass and say that.
Precious. So why is it that they keep? Why is it that they keep saying that they're following constitution when obviously the president is thrown out? You have mentioned cases of presidents winning and it wasn't possible for them not to win without the 25%. And, in this case, it's a different thing. Are we now looking at a situation of bias? Because, so many people, analysts and citizens alike, have accused the judiciary of being biased, of being compromised.
So if you look at the nature of the kind of government we run, we find out that we run a kind of government where we have three tiers of government that is still largely dependent on the executive. We have the judiciary, we have the executive, we have the legislature. Tell me what the legislatures can do today without, consulting the executive. You know very much about the 10th Assembly. What can they do without consulting the executive? Recently, the salaries of the judicial officers were increased by the present president. Does that tell you anything? And how autonomous really is the judiciary, even though the past administration of Muhammadu Buhari tried to ensure their autonomy? But how autonomous are they really? So how would you also rate a situation where someone scored about 36.6% of votes of 24 million votes and is largely responsible for over 200 million Nigerians?
Exactly. So, Precious, I'm sorry to cut in there. Talking about the votes, this is quite historic because for the first time in Nigeria, the man who has emerged as the president of the country, I think garnered just about 6.9 million votes. That's about 29% of the total vote that was counted. And we also, judging by the recorded low voter turnout. Now, I was on the street and I spoke to Nigerians, and many of them expressed their displeasure first at INEC for their irregularities, because they said if INEC had done their job, we probably would not be here, having to have this conversation with the judiciary. Now, there's also this distrust that has happened with the judiciary, where people say that even if INEC had not done their job, it means we cannot even trust you to right the wrongs. Now, How significant is this ruling in the broader context of Nigeria's electoral system, especially considering upcoming elections? Can we trust the political parties? I mean, should we fault INEC or is it the judiciary?
Absolutely, great question. So moving forward, I think that if this judgment sustains, first, from what I heard from your report, and I do very well concur with that, it's going to lead to a lot of voters apathy because people have, lost total trust in the electoral system in Nigeria, except something critical is done. Perhaps another thing that may happen is that people, because of that lack of trust, may also guard themselves appropriately before every election to ensure that they're not taking unawares again. So they will learn never to believe the electoral umpire moving forward. And again, the very sad thing about this judgment is that it's practically just states that whatever your background may be, whatever accusations that may be hanging on your neck, doesn't matter. You can be whoever you want to be. I mean, Boshwapi can come out of jail in a couple of times, in a couple of years, and contest for the president of Nigeria. And he has very, every right to do so. So, and I'd like to even state, if it were in Nigeria, would Ike Ekweremadu, for instance, gone to jail? Would Ike Ekweremadu have gone to jail? Imagine how difficult it would have been for the young man to prove to the court beyond reasonable doubt that his organ was about to be harvested, even though the deed hasn't been done. Imagine how difficult it would be. Do you think that the present Nigerian court can prove that and ensure Ekweremadu goes to jail? I mean, we have so many other cases that we had to ask about. So do you think that this tribunal case, if it were in other countries or similar crimes, I dare say, do you think the judgment would go exactly the same way it did go?
That's a valid question, Precious. Please hold that thought. We have our next guest now joining us. Like I mentioned earlier, a journalist and communication strategist, Charles Ideo, is here with us now. Charles, thank you so much for joining us. Please confirm that you can hear us.
I can hear you very clearly.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to have you join us. Now, Charles, earlier, I don't know if you heard what Precious was talking about. We're still towing the lines of judicial bias and compromise, according to what so many people have said, what strategists and analysts have said regarding the verdict that was delivered. And a very valid question, if I must say, that Precious raised. And that will move me to ask my next question. How does this ruling reflect on the effectiveness and the impartiality of Nigeria's judiciary, especially in handling election-related cases going forward?
All right, thank you very much. Let me attempt to unpack all these questions just roll up in one. First, at least what the Americans call a downer. What I just wanted to be a downer is that it's going to really deal a heavy blow to the desire of the young people in Nigeria to vote this time around. I mean, if we have any elections in the it might, the level of voter apathy is going to increase. Obviously, so because a lot of people's hopes have been dashed in this value. But again, if you look at it, I think this calls for a sober reflection, particularly the lawyers themselves, who the various parties, they hired to drive their cases. I think. It's also a reflection of our society when we have a case to prosecute. In most cases, you find the policemen or some other people, they just hush up the cases, and the evidences are usually not watertight to give you victory. Look at they spend so many. I think about 12, close on 13 hours yesterday, for them to give us everything that has to do precept by precept, line by line, and everything. Because in the past, what you found in the past was that after they are giving you judgment, they will say, okay, they're going to be explaining later. But they spent close to 13 hours for them to explain bit by bit and all that. And if you also look at it, the lawyers representing even the parties that were up in arms in the manner of speech, the ruling party, they actually had not fought the judgment per se. I mean, what they said is that, okay, our principals have told us to go to the Supreme Court because you also have a window for appeal, which is Supreme Court, of course, the court of the final court. But as I said yesterday, a lot of people's hopes were particularly young Nigerians who, for the very first time in the electoral history of Nigeria, you saw a very young people coming to say they want to be part of the electoral process in this country. So most of them, their hopes were dashed yesterday. And I wouldn't know if INEC or whoever has anything to do in order to rekindle their hope for them to be part of the elections in the future. So for me, that's why I call it a downer.
Okay, so Charles, I would like to ask, now you are talking about voter apathy, and then we've seen this play out. I mean, we can say that this played out judging from the previous elections, and this reflected in 2023 elections. My fear is that we might even see lower voter turnout in the coming election, and then that still has APC in power, and I'm sure they would be vying to, be re-elected into the presidency. So what do you think we should expect from the executive arm of government now? We've seen the fault from the election umpire. We've seen the fault of the judiciary. What should we be expecting the kind of a change from? Should it be the lawmakers or the executive arm of government? I do not think we can expect more from the executive arm of government because this favors them in one way or the other. So what should we throw the responsibility at now?
Okay, I think what I'm going to be saying is that the young ones, Nigeria, the youth Nigerians will have to start maybe an advocacy to say they had to tinker with the relevant electoral law. For instance, Section 52, Section 60, and Section 65 of the 2022 Electoral Act. Okay, he said those sections do not give INEC it does not make it mandatory for INEC to transmit results electronically. I mean, part of why the youth became so much interested in the electoral process of 2023 was because electronics, or whatever I call it, was going to be deployed. You remember the beavers of this world, remember the IREV and all that. So the youth being very techy, they said, well, for the very first time, they are speaking their language. So you saw a lot of them wanting to join, they all joined the fray. But with what they said that INEC is not mandatory, it's not mandatory for INEC to transmit results electronically, then the youth you have shot them in the foot, because it is what you need to move on with the rest of the world. With what the judges said yesterday, that INEC is not compelled to transmit results electronically, what it means is that our electoral process has taken a trip into the future, into the distant past. We seem to have gone to the antediluvian era. So what I think we should be doing is that the advocacy I mentioned is that for the young people in Nigeria to begin to ask that the lawmakers to begin to tinker with the relevant sections of the Electoral Act 2022 to make it compulsory for INEC to transmit a result electronically. Let it be something that's mandatory, so that people begin to look at, okay, yes, I mean, when I vote, my vote will count and it will also be counted. That's exactly I think what about. Again, and what you look at, if you look at the composition of National Assembly in 2023, that's the 10th Assembly, the opposition parties cumulatively have more numbers than even the government in power, but they are not making use of the advantage of that number they have. You have the PDP, about 100 and something, what's the name of it, members. You have LP with about 95 members. You have NNPP. You have all of them. If you put them together cumulatively, including ADC, they have more numbers. So I would expect that even the opposition should begin to take advantage of their numbers to begin to look at it, how to now force INEC's hands on the table to say you must ensure that you do what is right in order for us to go back and join those who are making progress to the future.
All right, thank you so much for that, Charles. I mean, we're pressed for time. I really would have loved to bring up the issue of anonymity on the part of the judges. I mean, what was the point of hiding the faces of the judges? But that's a conversation for another day. I want to say, well, we can't go deeply into that. I apologize, but okay, very quickly, Charles, can you let us in on that?
It is in line with global best practice, but you know, because you need to shield them. If you go to the US, when there's anything that has to do with a judge, what they do is to sketch. Is to just give you a sketch and say, okay, this is what the man looks like. Nobody ever shows the photo of nobody, whether it's a photo or whether it's a video. When the case is going to show the identity of the judges, it's against the ethics.
Right. Thank you for that clarification, Charles. And I want to use this opportunity to say thank you so much to both journalists. We have journalist and analyst Precious Eni, and of course, journalist and communication strategies Charles Ideho. Thank you both for clarifying the issue. Thanks a lot for joining us. You're still watching Report Desk Africa. We go on a short break now. When we come back, we continue the conversation, but from another perspective. Stay with us.